Hello, welcome back from the break. I'm Carolyn, and this is Matt, and we are going to guide you along the learning journey for the PPC track today. And because this is SMX Create, we're going to dive into imagination, creativity, and really the artistic side of PPC. So kicking us off today is Patrick Gilbert, and he's going to guide us through how to plan PPC campaigns in an artificial intelligence and machine learning world. So Matt knows Patrick, and he has some in-depth experience with PPC strategy and planning. So Matt, what are you really looking forward to in this session, and how do you approach planning in an AI and ML world?
Well, it's a good question, Carolyn. And, what I'm looking forward to in Patrick's session is to sort of lay the conceptual framework, because as PPC managers, we have this real desire to want to control everything. And in machine learning and AI, when you let the machines take over, if you put a human in the middle of it, you're going to have some issues. So that's difficult. But we all know that machines can do things faster, more consistently, and they have more signals that they can process. And so Patrick, I think, is going to, number one, give us a good idea of, first of all, when should we exert control and when we should sit back, and what's really happening and why should we do those things. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, sounds good. So I'm ready to get started if you are. Don't forget that there's a chat box down below. You may have to scroll if you're on a smaller screen, but you can put in your questions and comments, and then we'll come back to them later in the day for the live PPC Q&A. So make sure to put them in there. And Patrick, let's get the show on the road.
Hello, everyone. My name is Patrick Gilbert. I'm the Executive Director at our Venture Media Group. I'm also the author of Join or Die, Digital Advertising in the Age of Automation. This is a really unique time for our industry. We're a few years into a massive transformation into the age of automation. We've also had a global pandemic turn the entire world upside down. Marketers are running around like chickens with their heads cut off. They're attempting to create campaigns and develop strategy without a realistic sense of how we got here or where we're going. I'm here to challenge the way you think about this new era and about your digital advertising campaigns, because most people are getting it wrong. After this segment, you're all going to be able to understand the current state of automation, as well as the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on digital advertising. You'll also be able to think differently about the value of automation. You'll be able to understand how to train Google's algorithms in a way that will dramatically improve performance. And you'll learn some tips and strategies from real case studies. Last month, the Wall Street Journal reported that more than half of all advertising dollars now flow through either Google, Facebook, or Amazon. Take a second to let that sink in. Half of all advertising. We're not talking about digital advertising here. We're talking all advertising. The article, in search of an explanation, points to the pandemic as the primary reason. Quotes, beneath the shift are changes driven by the pandemic. More time spent on computer screens, more e-commerce, a jump in new business formation, and a steady improvement in tech giants' ability to demonstrate a better return on investment. Focus on that last part of that last sentence. It's tangentially thrown in as if it ought to be ignored. A steady improvement in tech giants' ability to demonstrate a return on investment. Folks, this has nothing to do with the pandemic and everything to do with automation. Now, there is no doubt that the pandemic has accelerated trends and increased e-commerce adoption rates. But to this extent, where 3 tech companies suddenly command more than 50% of all advertising revenue? No, I disagree, and I'm excited to prove it. These platforms are just better, plain and simple, and they're better because of automation. Marketers need to wake up to this fact because it's moving faster than you would think. Too many marketers are still running tests about whether or not manual CPC works better than smart bidding, or taking to social media and spending their time lamenting about the latest match type update. We need to face the facts. Automation is not going away, but search term data is going away. And so are keywords and many other levers that we've enjoyed playing around with over the last 10 years. If we want to develop successful campaigns in the modern era, we need to change the way we think about automation. And it starts here. So big idea number 1, the true value of automation. A lot of folks think that the value of automation is that it does simple tasks faster. And that's only partially true. The primary value of automation is that it creates opportunities for profitable advertising in areas that previously did not exist. Take competitor keywords, for example. Before the age of automation, competitor keywords were rarely profitable. So if it was Lowe's trying to bid on Home Depot's branded search terms. With manual bidding, it would have been nearly impossible for Lowe's to profitably bid on these terms because most people searching for Home Depot want Home Depot. Most. Now, in the old days, we would mathematically determine our max CPC bids by using our conversion rate for a given set of keywords and factoring in our profit margins. If we were Lowe's in this example, we take our average order value and our average profit margin multiplied by our average conversion rate on the Home Depot terms, and that would give us our max CPC bid. In this case, let's assume it was $1. That is, Lowe's could profitably pay up to $1 for a click on a Home Depot search. But what if the market price for a click on a Home Depot search was $5? We'd either never have the opportunity to show an ad, or we'd need to increase our bid to a place where it was just not profitable for us. And take a look at how we calculated that max bid, by the way. Average order value, average profit margin, average conversion rate. It's a lot of averages. Consumers don't operate on the average. They are unique, every damn one of them. Even if they search for the same query, even if they hail from the same in-market audience, and even if they search for the same term from the same geographic location at the same exact time as someone else. If you take nothing else from this presentation, please promise me that you'll stop talking about the individuals within your audience groups as if they're all the same. Automation allows us to go beyond averages and to look at individuals. For Lowe's, then, maybe there are times when they should be willing to outbid Home Depot on their own branded search terms. Not always, but sometimes. For example, what if someone is searching for Home Depot because they're in the car and they're just looking for the nearest home improvement store? They're not loyal to Home Depot, it's just the first thing that came to mind. That's an opportunity where Lowe's has a location around the corner. They should be willing to aggressively bid on that search. So the number one takeaway, that's automation in a nutshell. Finding profitable needles in the marketing haystack. Strategies that you've probably written off, like competitor keywords, Google Display Network prospecting, and Instagram stories, all need to be reconsidered. As we look to develop AI-driven campaigns in 2021 and beyond, this true understanding of automation and an attitude akin to keeping an open mind is essential. Big idea number 2, liquidity. In 2006, NASA engineers attempted to clearly define the roles that should be reserved for a human and those that should be left to automation while operating an aircraft. They painted a picture. Now imagine you're trying to navigate through a park. You have an appointment on the other side of the park and you're running late. You've never been through this park before, but thankfully you have a map. As with most parks, this one is filled with trees and people and other obstacles that might get in your way. Now, what would be your preferred method of transportation? A bicycle or a horse? Seems like a silly question. Not only is a bicycle slower than a horse, but it requires all of your attention. You're doing the hard work of not just operating a vehicle, but avoiding all the trees and people that'll be in your way. And you have to keep stopping to look at your map. A horse will instinctively avoid trees and people. You can ride the horse while you focus on the map, charting the course along the way. It's just like automation. It's not just faster, it's better. And so the NASA engineers now refer to this analogy as the H metaphor, which can be described as such. The humans chart the course and then rely on machines to manage the real-time calibrations. Too many marketers are still trying to figure out the best way to ride their bicycles. A modern marketer knows that a well-trained algorithm can operate as a horse. It is able to adapt to sudden changes in audience targeting, market fluctuations, creative executions, and placement options. To elaborate on the park example, consider the ways in which you might convey your goals to a horse. You're basically saying, I want to reach the other side of the park in the fastest amount of time without hitting any trees or people. The trees and people are added restrictions that make the horse's job a bit more difficult. In a restriction-free environment, like an empty park with no trees, the horse would help you reach your goal with even better results. PPC managers are prone to adding unnecessary restrictions to their digital advertising campaigns that, if removed, would improve overall performance. These restrictions generally include limited budgets, conservative return on ad spend or CPA goals, audience and placement exclusions, and exact match or negative keywords. The opposite of a restrictive environment is called a liquid environment. The International Advertising Bureau describes a liquid advertising environment as one where every ad dollar can flow to the most valuable impression. It's made possible when humans take their hands off the controls and allow the algorithms to read the terrain. There are 4 dimensions of liquidity: placement, audience, budget, and creative. Basically just means if we stop being so picky about when, where, and how our ads are being served, we'll allow the machine the freedom it needs to drive the results that we desire. And this includes keywords. Keywords are placements. We need to stop being so picky. Okay, micro moments. In 2015, Google's Senior VP of Advertising and Commerce introduced this concept. He said, there are other moments, the I want to know moments, the I want to go moments, the I want to do moments, and the I want to buy moments that really matter. We call these micro moments, and they're game changers for both consumers and brands. Micro moments occur when people reflexively turn to a device, increasingly a smartphone, to act on a need, or to act on or to learn something, to do something, to discover something, watch something, or buy something. It's a confusing quote. They're intent-rich moments when decisions are made and preferences are shaped. In these moments, consumer expectations are higher than ever. Now, I remember laughing out loud when I first read this. It seemed like your typical idealistic googly narrative, but I'd come to learn that he was absolutely right. Modern digital advertisers should not seek to simply understand the preferences or interests of the target audience. Rather, they should seek to identify moments. Then at the right moment of interaction, interact. Automation, and specifically automation operating in a liquid environment, allows this to happen. In addition to these micro moments, liquidity also helps unlock arbitrage opportunities. We use this term to describe ad placements that are underpriced, usually due to low competition. Gary Vaynerchuk often tells a story about how in the early 2000s, he was an early adopter of Google AdWords. He worked for his father's liquor store and managed e-commerce operations. He bought the exact match keyword wine for 5 cents a click and was a massive success. And he took this small liquor store to building an empire. 5 cents a click, right? That keyword should have cost more, much more. SEMrush currently has that exact match keyword priced around $2.50. Vaynerchuk's initial wealth was generated from unlocking tremendous arbitrage. Unfortunately, the market eventually catches up. There are no secret keywords anymore. But if you're willing to use fewer restrictions in your campaigns than your competitors, then you can bet on finding underpriced ad inventory. And by the way, here's a practical tip. YouTube ads are currently the largest arbitrage opportunity for digital advertisers. So enjoy it while you can. Big idea number 2 takeaway with liquidity. Micro moments and arbitrage opportunities can only be identified in liquid environments. For every restriction that you add to your campaigns, another opportunity for a valuable ad impression is removed. Big idea number 3, how to train your algorithm. So everything we've talked about so far basically just summarizes all the great things you can do with automation. But if you want to make sure that these things actually happen, you need to make sure that you're properly training your algorithms. So step 1, you'll always be learning, right? The purpose of an algorithm, at least within our digital ad campaigns, is to accurately predict the conversion rate of a given impression. If the algorithm can accurately predict the probability of a conversion, it can then determine the value of that ad placement. Now, here's a quote from my book, Join or Die. Shameless plug. There's no perfect algorithm that can anticipate the likelihood of conversion with 100% accuracy. The algorithm's goal is never to become perfect. That's impossible. Its goal is to reduce the gap between expected outcome and actual outcome. With more data, the algorithm increases its confidence and can reduce the size of that gap, increasing the likelihood of success. We often talk about accuracy within our algorithms. We rarely talk about their confidence. You really do need both. An overly confident but inaccurate algorithm will bankrupt you. But an accurate algorithm that lacks confidence will prevent growth. So if you've ever wondered why your smart campaigns aren't scaling, despite the fact that you're hitting your ROAS targets, it's because they lack confidence. And you can change that. An accurate and confident algorithm therefore requires two things: quality data and time to learn from said data. Unfortunately, many businesses lack one or both. The number one issue I see with clients today is that they do not have proper systems in place to feed quality data back into their Google Ads account. Conversion data is an algorithm's favorite diet. Lead gen clients. You need to ensure that you have some level of CRM tracking in place with conversion actions that properly track quality leads and closed deals. You need to stop optimizing just for quantity of leads, and you need to start training your algorithms to understand your ideal customers that actually generate revenue for your business. E-commerce clients, you're not off the hook. Simply setting up a conversion action to track your purchases is no longer enough. You should be thinking about how you can train Google to understand your goals in a more sophisticated way than just understanding an average return on ad spend target. If you want better results, you need to feed the algorithm better data. Now, we have an e-commerce client that has a massive product catalog, and their products drastically vary in profit margin. So instead of simply targeting for one target return on ad spend across the board, or attempting to segment our budget across dozens of smart shopping campaigns with different return on ad spend targets, we came up with a different solution. We wanted to be able to benefit from liquidity, but give good data to the algorithm. So we used a data layer variable on the site, which instead of just tracking revenue, pulls in profit. And we used that value variable to feed back into Google as our optimization goal. So we're training the system to actually optimize for profit as opposed to just like a random revenue or return on ad spend target. And this simple adjustment over a 6-month training period allowed us to increase bottom line profit by more than 60%. So how much time does it take to train an algorithm? It depends. As PPC managers, we need to balance two conflicting realities. Our algorithms need time and an investment in data, but we also need to ensure that our clients don't go out of business while waiting for an algorithm to learn. And this is one of the areas that causes friction between Google and the advertisers that run ads on Google. Advertisers hate being told by Google that they need to increase their budgets or wait another month before assessing performance, especially when they're tight on cash flow. So how do you strike a balance? You do so by controlling the data inputs. If you reduce the size of the learning environment and increase the quality of data that exists in that environment, then you can hopefully speed up the rate at which the algorithm can deliver accurate predictions. So I'll give you an example. Imagine you're trying to teach a child about probability. You hand them a double-sided coin and ask them to figure out the likelihood that it'll land on tails. You tell them they have 1 hour or maybe 100 chances to flip the coin and provide an answer back to you. In either of these scenarios, they'll probably figure out that it's 50%. But imagine you handed that same child a deck of cards and then ask them to determine the likelihood of drawing an ace of spades. This is a much more challenging question, and it's unlikely that after 1 hour or 100 trials, they'll have enough data or confidence to give you anywhere near a correct answer. In this first experiment, we shrank the size of the learning environment. We controlled the inputs. There are just two possible outcomes. So we increased the likelihood that they would get to the accurate answer sooner. In your digital ad campaigns, this is where you should be thinking about adding restrictions. When necessary, you should add negative keywords or be more strict with your match types or bid strategies to help enrich the learning environment. For example, if you're an e-commerce store with a large product catalog running ads on Google Shopping for the very first time, I would not recommend listing all of your products at once. Instead, you should determine the products that are purchased most often by your highest quality customers. You don't just want Google to help you drive sales. You also want them to learn about the best kinds of people that convert on your website. This should be factored into your campaign structure. And so wait, didn't I just go on this long piece about reducing restrictions and increasing liquidity, and now I'm saying the exact opposite? That's exactly my point. This is the value of the PPC account manager in the age of automation. You have to choose the environment in which your algorithms will learn. If you first shake your bad habits of unnecessary restrictions, you can then start to think about helpful restrictions that will expedite the learning process. So now we're going to talk about data bias within the context of training an algorithm. So during World War II, a group of data scientists were given an important task: figure out why so many Allied planes are being shot down over enemy territory. They started collecting data to see which areas of the planes were most vulnerable to enemy fire. They charted out all the bullet holes from their fleet, and they came up with this: a visual showing all the different bullet holes on a standard plane that they had. So the Navy started to increase the amount of armor in the areas that took the most fire. Does anyone see a flaw in this? If we tasked an algorithm with optimizing for better planes, would this be the right data to feed into the machine? When this analysis in World War II didn't prove to be successful, they brought in a guy named Andrew Wald from Columbia University. Wald took one look at this graphic, the data from all the planes that had, and he basically said, you guys are idiots. You have it all wrong. You've taken this data exclusively from planes that have successfully returned from battle. You should have been collecting this data from the planes that were shot down. He pointed to one area of the graphic that had no bullet hole markings: the engines. It was as simple as that. Increase the armor around the engines, and fewer planes will be shot out of the sky. So this phenomenon became known as survivorship bias, and it's loosely defined as the tendency to make conclusions based on incomplete or incorrect data sets. Marketers fall victim to survivorship bias every day, but the survivors aren't heroes returning from war. They're your customers. Many of us are guilty of letting existing customers skew our perception of our target market when we should be focusing on the individuals who could have become customers if they had not been shot down over competitive territory. So here's an example of how better quality conversion data helped us train Google's algorithms to seek out better customers. We have a client that's a reseller of satellite TV and internet packages in Canada. They're a sales engine. They receive a ton of phone calls, but many of them are from existing customers looking for customer support. Those are bad calls, and there's really no way to prevent it from happening 100% of the time. This account heavily relied on call-only ads and call extensions. So we removed them based on a theory that low-quality customer support calls were largely driven by people clicking on any phone number that appeared on the Google SERP. Now again, right, so this is like a large percentage, or most people, not all, most people are doing this. That's our theory. Now, when we remove the call extensions, we're forcing these users, if we want them to ever convert, they have to visit the website first before calling. This should help reinforce the fact that we're a sales solution, not a customer support line. And it should hopefully reduce the quantity of bad phone calls. Now, the client pushed back. These call extensions drove the bulk of their calls, and they knew that at least some of their customers came through these ads. And I kind of pushed back and said, look, you need to trust your customers. There are obviously exceptions to this rule, but if someone is in the market for your product or service and they're not willing to work with you if they have to first go to your website for 10 seconds to then click on your phone number, they're probably not a good customer. So it's not just that we want to train Google to optimize for phone calls, because if so, we would do click-to-call ads and call extensions and this stuff that was generating a high volume. We need to train Google to optimize for our best quality customers. And sometimes this requires some sacrifices. And so in this instance, our hypothesis was very correct. We implemented this back in August of this past year, 2020. Within 6 months, their call quality has dramatically improved. Their sales team is no longer wasting their time fielding customer service calls, and their overall revenue is up 30%. Okay, let's circle back and talk about what we've covered so far. The true value of automation and why it's important to keep an open mind when developing modern campaign strategy. Liquidity helps identify micro moments and unlock arbitrage opportunities. The importance of time and data to help train an algorithm. Great, all good stuff so far. Hope everyone's still with me. What else do we have to cover? Let's debunk that Wall Street Journal article and prove to everyone how awesome automation really is. That's kind of my main goal out here. So, over the last year, e-commerce has done really well, and everyone seems to think it's due to the pandemic. A lot of people love to talk about this, but not many are talking about what will happen when the pandemic finally ends. How are we supposed to model out projections of budget for the future without any sort of mechanism to figure these things out? So we really wanted to get to the bottom of this. So this chart shows one of our e-commerce clients, it's their revenue over the last few years. To the untrained eye, it looks like COVID-19 did wonders for their business. That point where it jumps up is basically April of last year. Now, for a while, their industry was really shaken up. They compete directly with Amazon, who pulled their ads from Google for about 45 days between March and April. A few other competitors dropped off as well. While everyone zigged, or everyone seemed to have zigged, we chose to zag. We put our foot on the gas, and we weren't alone. If you could see from this chart showing our auction insights over time, Wayfair in particular picked up where Amazon left off, and a few other competitors, including Etsy, emerged onto the space. So things were certainly shaken up, but it sort of normalized over time. And if the Wall Street Journal was correct, and that it's now easier to be an e-commerce business than it was pre-pandemic, then we should see a few things happening within our Google Ads account. So you would think that with increased screen time and more e-commerce shopping and a lack of retail competition, that conversion rates would increase and CPMs would decrease. More supply, more demand. We should be just kind of shooting fish in a barrel here. We didn't see that. This shows our conversion rate and our CPM over time. Conversion rates have roughly stayed the same, and CPMs are actually more expensive than they were year over year. It changes every month, but overall it's up year over year. But if you remember that revenue chart from the previous slide, it clearly shows that revenue jumped at the start of the pandemic, and we have not looked back. So we sought out to measure the actual impact. One of our data analysts created a model using 5 years worth of data to predict revenue. The idea is that if you use historic data to develop a model, you can test that model against the actual outcomes. And the model was largely accurate. So we can use this model to then measure against 2020 revenue numbers. If the model's prediction was below the actual revenue numbers, then we can assume that outside variables, such as a pandemic, played a significant role. So when we run the regression, if there was a COVID impact, if there was a pandemic impact, increased screen time, all that good stuff, then our expected revenue, what the model spit out, should be far below the actual revenue. And the opposite turned out to be true. So the orange bars here represent a conservative predicted outcome, and the yellow bar is a predicted aggressive predicted outcome. The actual revenue numbers are represented by the gray in the middle. For 2020, our actual revenue fell well below those two numbers. The difference was really that cost increased dramatically in 2020. And that's not really a bad thing. Overall revenue was up close to 80%, and the ad campaigns were much more profitable. But it does prove that there was no positive impact from the pandemic. In fact, it actually proves the opposite. It proves that it was actually more difficult to acquire a customer in 2020 than it was in previous years. So what caused the surge in revenue? We spent a lot of time on this, and we came down to this. It had to do with more advertising. We invested in more advertising, and we invested in training our algorithms to understand the highest quality audience. For a brief period a year ago, it was the absolute Wild West. We were able to put our foot on the gas and scale our spend with little negative outcomes. Typically, when you invest in scaling, it takes time to train your algorithms. You need to sacrifice short-term profitability. However, this was a unique situation where we were able to have our cake and eat it too. But this doesn't necessarily mean that marketers can't learn from this. We proved that you can unlock a new level of profitable ad spend. And we're confident that this will continue long after the pandemic is over. And we did so because we invested in quality data to help train our algorithms. And we continue to embrace liquidity and seek out arbitrage opportunities. And most importantly, we continue to think differently about how automation is reshaping the marketing universe as we know it. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Once again, my name is Patrick Gilbert. I work for Adventure Media Group. If you enjoyed the presentation, check us out online. Check out my book, Join or Die, Digital Advertising in the Age of Automation, available on Amazon. I'm currently trying to train Amazon's algorithms to understand how great of a book Join or Die really is. So if you can leave a review, I'd really appreciate that as well. But thank you for the opportunity. Have a good one. We'll talk soon in the Q&A session.